Well, I'm so excited to be back. This is a topic that's dear to my heart for multiple reasons, but really because I'm a lover of men and I'm a lover of male pleasure and especially male sexual health. And so we're going to discuss today the prostate, but more specifically the massage and why it's so important and how to do that and all that good stuff.
All right.
So why don't you tell us, what is exactly the male prostate?
Well, the male prostate, it is a walnut-sized gland, and it's actually, you can reach it through the anus. It's probably somewhere, depending on each person, I would say if you were to go maybe about anywhere from 2 to 3 of your knuckles in, but maybe you could also say like 2 to 3 inches. And then in terms of where it's located, though, it's actually between the base of the root of the penis, the part that's internal, and the bladder. And it's, like I said, like a walnut size, and the urethra actually goes through it. And it produces about 30% of the semen that you would then ejaculate. It's also going to produce the different kinds of enzymes that are going to protect the semen from the acidity of the vagina. And in addition to that, it also makes sure that it goes into contractions upon orgasm, which then allow for the semen not to have retrograde ejaculation, meaning that the semen
pushing it out.
Goes out.
Yeah.
And then lastly, it's also erogenous pleasure zone. It's highly innervated, and so you can have a lot of pleasure there. And I believe the nerves that are innervated are the hypogastric nerve as well as the pelvic nerve. And so there are certain nerves that the rest of your penis, when being stimulated during a sexual experience, don't get stimulated in the same way as when you do the prostate, which is why they also call it the male G-spot. And a lot of guys, when they start to explore it, can encounter that there's a lot of pleasure there, though at first they might not.
I've definitely witnessed that.
Tell us some more. What do you mean?
I've witnessed men literally go into multi-orgasms when this part of their body is actually included. And it doesn't always have to be included through touch. It can be included through how they're actually breathing. Because I've had some skilled lovers that actually know how to breathe properly into their pelvis, but I'd love you to tell us more about that. But I want to know, like, why would prostate massage be something worthy of considering? Like, why is that actually important? I have my reasons, but I really want to hear from you.
Well, I mean, for all the reasons that I listed for functionality, being able to make sure that the entire area is able to be relaxed and isn't holding tension is then going to help optimize that functionality. Also, too, in the same way that you would stimulate your penis or exercise a muscle or just being stimulating that gland, it's going to bring more circulation there. It's going to help it to, with any kind of like buildup or things that might be unhealthy, just to bring more blood flow and sensation is a good thing.
Yeah, and in my previous training and experience I used to teach men and women a lot of the Taoist sexual stuff. And I remember just doing a lot of reading in Chinese medicine and Taoist practice, and this area of the body for the male, they are very practical about it. They're like, why are you worried about sticking your own finger in your own bum? Like, this is like for health reasons, and you do it daily, and you're gonna stay virile all of your life, and you're never gonna have problems. And so I remember my teacher being very confused by the Western man's response of, I'm not gonna, why would I, that's gay or whatever. And then the teacher going, what are you talking about? It's your own body. You need to take care of it. You need to get practical. And he would squat down and kind of show, like, here's what you do when you're on the toilet. You do this thing, or in the shower.
Yeah, there's this stigma that if you're putting something into your body, you're being penetrated, therefore you are kind of in this taking it submissive position. I mean, I remember talking to a friend that had penetrated another man with intercourse, and he said, no, I'm not gay because I wasn't the one being penetrated, I was doing the penetration. Yeah. So there's this idea of penetration. I think for other people it's like, oh, well, if this part like brings any pleasure to me, then they might get curious around other ways that they might find pleasure, and so they're also possibly afraid of it being a slippery
stigma around
slope. But not just stigma too, I think they have a fear that it might lead them towards liking it. and then starting to
I think liking it is a great thing. It doesn't have anything to do with your identity. This is the really important
It's
part.
not just liking it, though. It would be I like it, therefore, what are other ways I can explore it? Maybe a finger's not enough. Maybe actually I should do something bigger, and then bigger, and then bigger. And then all of a sudden they're like, oh, I want a cock. And so
well, I have to say I had a partner who, at some point I was like, I think you might be bisexual, and I think you may want the real thing. Just from where we got in our playtime together.
And I mean, there is a chance that might happen, but then again, I doubt that person now has like seriously regretted it.
Of very, very super straight practitioners who just take care of the prostate, because it's honestly like what I find about Western medicine and what they know about the prostate and how they're helping men is really pathetic. I just think there's a lot of neglect. I think there's ageism. I'd love us to talk about that. I have a colleague who does a lot of surgeries on women, but she would sit in on surgeries for men, and she was always horrified that the quickest procedure, the quickest way to deal with things would actually cause sexual dysfunction for the patient. And she would say, why aren't you taking the extra 5 minutes to ensure that nerve doesn't get damaged so that he has sexual function? They're like, he's too old, he doesn't need it. Which is not a surgeon's job to decide. I mean, for me, sexuality is your whole life. My grandfather, from what his girlfriend shares, he was sexual till his very last day. And I think that's actually healthy human expression. Not, they don't need it, he's past 50 or whatever it is, so forget about it. I mean, what are you talking about? There's very virile men that all the way until their last days.
And just in terms of the psychological feeling of this is maybe part of your identity, also too, if it's something that you then enjoy, but then also too, just in terms of the different types of like hormones and everything that are being produced by having erections and having this area be in constant movement is really important. And I would also state too that a lot of men that then stimulate this area, they might not even feel pleasure from it. So the fear that then, this is going to be the thing that makes me then be attracted to men. It's more, you probably already have an attraction and then you decide to go and explore that. I haven't really heard of someone who then, because of exploring that, then it made them attracted to men where they weren't beforehand to some extent.
Correct. I also want to talk about this, not just like the medical neglect that I see in the ageism. I want to also talk about on the other side of the spectrum where men are learning either the no-fap, where they don't do any touching of any kind, the issue with that, or the practitioners who are doing seminal retention, so they're doing ejaculatory choice, to understand why the prostate massage, no matter what your situation is actually a necessary ingredient for health, primarily, and then all the other wonderful side effects.
So you hear a lot of the chances, for instance, of prostate cancer going up if someone is not ejaculating. Therefore, there's then this argument of, well, if you're going to be doing non-ejaculatory sex for any extended period of time, it could lead to increased levels of cancer or increased likelihood that you'll get cancer. Now, the reason again is because there's no movement in the prostate, and if you are then stimulating this area while doing that, which is never discussed in any of the studies, you actually mitigate that.
Well, that's an ancient practice too. You literally every day do all these kinds of like penis stretches to get the ligaments, because that's how the penis actually shrinks with age, is a ligament issue. So they're doing their penis stretches, they're doing the slapping of the penis as well, and they're doing all kinds of things to their penis, but then they're also addressing the root of the penis, which is the prostate area.
Well, and that's one of the ways that, if a man's like, okay, I feel that I should go and I have a lot of tension at the base of my penis, I have a lot of tension in my anus, and in the program YAFAP, which is this 21-day program for guys to gain ejaculatory choice, meaning that they can choose to or choose not to, whether they have premature ejaculation or delayed ejaculation, to then be able to gain control over this involuntary inability to orgasm or inability to last as long as they would like to, as well as a whole bunch of other things that are resolved just around proper erectile functioning and training to condition it towards, loads of pleasure, is that if you do, like, especially let's say like lots of Kegels, which you're hearing about, you're literally building a lot of tension there. And if it's somebody who has been exercising a lot.
Yes, so our trainer, who was an Olympic athlete, who trains the special forces, the professional level sports teams and just high performance people and fighters and stuff, he's always telling us, like my top guys, they actually have problems because of the pelvic tension.
And it's natural that if all you're doing is squeezing and then you add Kegels onto it, you actually compound the problem. Well, the ability to create relaxation in this area, the pelvic floor and around the entire prostate, is absolutely key. And so when I speak to guys about this, I say, well, if the idea of pleasuring your butt is, what you're afraid of, you can think about this as I'm stimulating the internal third of the penis, which, isn't exposed, and bringing health, vitality, and stimulating that. So that way, then again, they're stimulating their
blood flow
penis.
Is health.
Yes.
Blood flow is health. So,
well, and blood flow also too is exactly what you need to bring oxygen to that part of the body, which then gets the nerves to fire off, and you become so much more conscious of your erection. It would be like most people are only stimulating, let's say, like the tip of their penis, which would be like dabbling with the leaves of a tree, but you're ignoring the root, which is where all of the blood flow, all of that power comes from. We've had the opportunity to do V-cell treatments for just optimization of the genitals. And one of the things that we've noticed is that when getting the V-cell treatment and the injections, that naturally is going to add tension there just from the nature of an injection. But in addition to that, when you are having that much more blood flow flowing through, which then translates into sexual desire, power, potency, and pleasure, you actually need to make sure that all the pipes are flowing correctly. Exactly. Therefore, again, this prostate massage becomes even more important if you're looking to do any of those kind of biohacks.
I mean, I had a colleague who lived in Brussels, and she had a healing center, and their number one selling treatment, because they did a lot of different types of treatment, was the prostate massage. And she said it's all guys with suits, just they're busy, they're stressed, they have a high intensity life, they are training at the gym, they're running around, flying here, flying there. And so guys would come almost every 2 weeks, sometimes once a week, and just get this relief. And she said it was crazy how much tension and trapped heat there was in this area of the body. It would have been awesome if you could have ever interviewed her. She has passed, not because of that, just something happened. But I just remember her love and passion to support men to be a little bit more at ease, and then they would go home and actually enjoy their sex lives a little bit more.
Well, if you have any kind of stress, if just someone goes, and they end up like shocking you, your pelvic floor clenches and you start to develop what's called a tight ass. And then if it becomes chronic stress, or you're chronically angry, or you're just really like set in your ways and very stiff, they literally call you a tight ass. That word, that phrase has meaning.
Yes, and if you're like holding back saying something and gritting your teeth, this kind of tight jaw actually is reflected.
All the orifices are connected.
Get reflected down into the pelvic area.
So those with the stiff upper lip as well, like if you hear about this, creates tension there, and so.
Is that
Giving
what you
that
mean
prostate,
by being a bit anal?
Exactly, or a tight ass.
Not so relaxed and open-minded.
Well, and so what then? This way of interacting and bringing touch to this part of your body is going to create that general relaxation there, and I can just speak from a felt state of the difference. I remember the first time that I did it. One thing on a very practical side just allowed for going to the bathroom and pooping much more easily. It's also the amount of movement in my pelvic floor to be able to expand just with a natural breath, which is such an important part of being able to regulate one's arousal and then start to have a natural cycle to one's erection that allows for sex to go on and on and on, as opposed to just get hard, ejaculate, and then you're done, is precisely bringing relaxation to that area.
I love it. And I also want you to mention, like, we are talking strictly right now solo, like this is what you do for self-care and sexual health and sexual vitality. But as you know, you in our bespoke stuff and on your own have coached many couples where the partner learns on how to actually give this type of touch. I think that's super important. When I see partners like supporting each other, their sexual health, like the one example I'm thinking of fairly recently where the couple, through politeness, hadn't been sexual because they had guests over, and they started, the gentleman started to have problems with peeing. He had to keep peeing, so there was this thought, oh, maybe he has a bladder infection. And then anyways, so they went to the ER, and at the end of all that, there was no bladder infection.
Exactly.
So then there was this fear that something was happening with the prostate.
Well, what was going on was that the doctors looked at them because of their age and said, oh, well, you're probably older, so it's just natural that, your prostate's swelling, and we're just going to give you, I forget what it was called, like prostate flow or something like that, some kind of flow max, and which is basically to help dilate the prostate because he was not able to be going to the bathroom.
But it takes, like, 10 days before it's effective?
Takes 10 days for it to be effective. Also, it's not really solving the root cause of why this is happening. And so I was quite adamant with them that they don't accept that answer. And this was rather distressing to them because they were people who were very sexually active, and so just being written off as, well, it's just your time's kind of up, is not at all.
It was a big distress for
exactly.
them.
It wasn't at all how they identified themselves. It was a very important part of their connection, of their intimacy, and to have it overlooked like that, frankly, I was infuriated on behalf of them. And so But then you clued in. Well, I started asking questions. And the first hint I had was that when they were telling me about how they also were trying to go to the bathroom just to defecate, that cum would come out. I said, okay, well, I know that can happen to me when I've been retaining semen.
Intentionally.
When I haven't been ejaculating. Yeah, exactly. And then also I would know that I would typically stimulate this area. So I started to ask them, like, oh, how often do you actually have sex? Which was not something that the doctor had asked them. Then I heard...
I wish doctors would just start asking that and just stop doing the ageist thing of, oh, they're old, they're not having sex.
Yeah. Well, and then if they would have found out that these people were having more sex on average than
the young people,
your typical 20-year-old or teenager or just frankly, just across all brackets, they were having sex daily. And so I then asked, well, okay, you're having sex daily, typically. You normally ejaculate daily. Yes. Okay. Well, what happens, because it's Christmas time, or you guys kind of waiting for the guests to leave? And then they kind of giggled to themselves and said yes. And I said, oh, well, that's the issue then, because you have not been getting that prostate going through contraction, stimulating, and it's essentially like
and
swelling
even blood
up
flow just from erections.
Precisely. And so you're not now able to, you're going to have more difficulty peeing. So I literally then guided them in how to stimulate the prostate.
Well, I hope we're going to talk about that in the explicit side. I really want to go into details of the instructions.
Well, I won't go into yet how it happened, but the outcome though was that, and thank goodness that they were open-minded to this. And this is a very straight male, and for him, he actually was quite hilarious about it. It's like, well, it's another way that me and my wife can enjoy things, and from a functional position, like he literally was like, you got to make sure that the plumbing's correct. I'm like, all right, well, that's a great way to look at it. And after doing that, did not have a single problem going to the bathroom, was able to start doing it himself, and also then shared that. And remember, we had several follow-up calls where they would start off by saying that they were doing their nightly homework, but the thing that he described was that night there was just a lot of heat and movement there, and relaxation and relief.
Yes.
And this probably is a part of his body that had never been stimulated directly, except for the body does naturally stimulate when you go to the bathroom.
When you go to the bathroom, or you sneeze, or you laugh.
You breathe, etc. But to really,
or I guess when
your
you
breathing even helps your body relax, but it's still different than getting a physical massage. It's just at another level.
And it's not the same as a prostate check, because those are not fun a lot of the times. You're uncomfortable, there's bright lights, it's done in an awkward way, it's like,
well, that was also part of my irritation too, is that the hospital wouldn't even do a prostate check, and so then they were left with, well, is this maybe cancer?
Yeah.
And then because of the healthcare system that they had, it was going to be
3 weeks?
Several weeks at least before getting to go see a urologist. And they had put a catheter in that wasn't working and created pain and blood and everything. And after they did this, they just said, forget it, took out the catheter, and to this day, they're doing great.
Yeah, exactly. Well, so I would love in the explicit side to really, like, what can a solo person do on their own? What can a partner do to assist? Just, I think it's such an important skill set to make sure that people have that.
Yes.
I do want to bring something up before we go to the explicit that's a little touchy.
Okay. The episode has been all about touchy.
Yeah, so far it's been all about touchy. We'll talk also in explicit, like what's manual touch versus toys, but what I want to bring up right now has to do with this idea of dethroning the patriarchy and this pegging movement done in a way where it's their time to suffer kind of thing, like it's their turn. And I don't like that. I don't like rage against any body part.
Yes.
Would you just talk briefly, because we're not teaching, this is not an episode on pegging, but it's, I think, just a thought to bring in as we're talking about putting conscious touch into an area.
We're talking about male chauvinism. And more than likely the guy that's doing this probably isn't a male chauvinist, which is why they're also open to doing that, especially if it's like a female partner. Now, if it's their kink because that's what they are into, then go for it and, dethrone the patriarchy if that's what turns the both of you on. But I think what you're speaking about, though, is where this is being done from a place of revenge, and then the guy
rage, yeah.
and the guy is actually being in some sense humiliated and not really having a care whether they like that or not.
And whether it feels good or not.
Yes.
Yeah.
Well, and that's the thing. If you are a proponent of the body and health, doing something that's unhealthy to the body, something that isn't really consensual, then isn't good. And there was a trend that was maybe like 3 or 4 years ago. I was just seeing all this stuff on TikTok and Instagram and about like, yeah, I pegged him and it's his turn now. And it's like, that doesn't really make
I've
anything
heard sex
better.
Educators speak that way. And it's really upsetting to me, because if it was in the opposite direction, we would be yelling Me Too and rape and,
And to say, well, it's been done to us, therefore we're going to do it back to them, doesn't correct the problem.
Doesn't correct the problem.
And especially when you start to find out that a lot of men that actually are abusive to women, have been sexually abusive to women, have been also sexually abused themselves. And so now if you're just going to go and abuse them, like it perpetuates the cycle going.
It's a systemic abuse that just keeps going. And that's the sad thing that we found when in our work in South Africa was the surprising research that showed that because there's tremendous amount of intimate partner violence and all kinds of things going on, but one of the factors that they were not aware of initially was that these perpetrators, when they were little boys, were being
typically
sodomized
by uncles or
neighbors
or school teachers.
Yeah, so it's awful. It's a trauma.
Yeah.
It's really not good. So I think that the prostate massage has practical health pieces, but I also think, because we'll discuss that I think in the explicit side, but all the different emotions that can come up, the different states of being because of the nerves that are being stimulated are the nerves that can.
We just had
us.
an episode on the art and practice of receiving.
Yeah.
And being able to receive this, even if you're thinking, okay, this isn't for my pleasure, but just being able to receive a touch that adds a healing component or a health maintenance component, because maybe nothing's necessarily broken or going off, but just maintaining proper health is going to enrich that intimacy, that ability to have sex have other purposes than just for orgasm. And also as well, if you find that the man is, and let's say your partner to a man that is resistant to it, if you are holding any of those kind of, I'm getting to dom him, or I'm getting like this kind of begging, to put him in his place type of attitude, this is likely also where you're going to find that there's some resistance, because he very well might be picking up on some of those cues.
Yeah, I mean, who would want to open up, especially a vulnerable area, if someone doesn't have the great intent?
And if they think that they're not going to be respected or considered manly
or
after
even
doing this.
In confidence, where it's not going to be talked about and shared with family members or friends or whatever.
Bragged about on TikTok.
Exactly. Well, I would love to switch into the explicit, because there's just so much I want to talk about there. Hopefully this has perked your interest enough. Do check out YAFAP. It is an incredible program. You can do it solo and you can do it partnered.
Yes.
So it will teach you a lot. To join us for the complete and explicit version of this podcast, just simply upgrade your membership and you'll get instant access.